There we go. Welcome, everyone, to the last Friday Transportation Seminar of Winter Quarter. So welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Doe. I'm a faculty member in Urban Studies and Planning and Director of the Center for Transportation Studies. I helped co-organize this seminar along with some of my colleagues, including Chris Monsieur over here from Civil and Environmental Engineering. Welcome, everyone. In case you didn't know, we do webcast the seminars, and because we do so, when we get to the portion of the day or the event, seminar where you can ask questions, please use the microphones that are positioned on most of the tables around the room and hold the touch area at the bottom. Keep the red light lit while you're asking the question so the people watching on the web can hear the question. And we do have people who regularly watch on the web, so we're not just making you do this to torture you or something. There are a few tables where the microphones either don't work or they're gone, in which case I have this portable mic and we'll try to get over to you to get the question that way. So, with those logistics taken care of, I'm going to introduce our speaker. We're very happy today to have Yizhao here from University of Oregon. She's an assistant professor in the planning program there at U of O, and we'll try not to hold the U of O affiliation against her. We're actually hoping to increase our collaboration with her down at U of O. She got her PhD in planning from Cornell University, and she's been at U of O for a couple years now, and she's doing some interesting work, including what she'll be talking about today on children's school travel. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, the title says school travel, but I have to warn you for those who come in to expect to see a lot of data on the travel per se. At this point, actually, we haven't had our survey sent out to collect those data yet. But the presentation is related to school travel, even though at this point is not the travel behavior. We're going to talk about school travel from a sort of a broader perspective. So just give you a little bit context of this project. This project is funded by OTREC, and I work with Professor Mark Schlossberg at U of O and with a group of students down at U of O, that we look at school travel from the process of parents choose where to live, and that process determine home school distance, and that distance later translating to their travel decision. So we're trying to look at school travel from this sort of a path of decision making, instead of looking at school travel as purely reaction of the parents toward built environment. So that's how this project sort of little bit different from other projects looking at school travel, particularly because we take into consideration this location choice. Okay, so just give you a quick number in terms of what the school travel, why it's so interesting. This graph shows this about 30 years trend of change in terms of the type of travel means parents choose for their children to go to school. So I want you to particularly look at these two bars in sort of this signaled by this red box here. So in 1969, about 14% of children arrived school in private automobiles, but 30 years later, that number jumped to 48, so that's 3 times higher. And then for children who walk or bike to school, back in 1969, the number was 42. And that number actually dropped threefold, like a third. Now is only 13% of the children that walk or bike to school. So this, from the children's perspective, sort of think about the implication on the children. This has tremendous health impact on them. And then looking at from the transportation perspective, this has huge impact on environment and congestion as well. So why fewer students walk or bike to school? And that's sort of the main research question we're trying to deal with in our sort of broader project. So the first issue is longer distance from home to school. There's quite a few reasons why the distance become longer from home to school. So parents often cited this longer distance being the primary barrier for their kids to go to school. And the research also shows when the distance exceeds 1 mile, the likelihood of children being able to walk or bike to school drops significantly. So, for example, the study done by Professor Mark Schlossberg, what he found out is even for middle school students, when the distance is less than 1 mile, we can get close to a third of students who walk or bike to school. But when the distance goes beyond 1 mile, that percentage drop to 3.5. So you can see the distance plays such a huge role here. Of course, urban form, that this has been well studied at this point in terms of the kind of street geometry, the kind of connectedness from home to school, the availability of physical infrastructure in terms of sidewalks, in terms of the well-signaled crosswalks. Those things help play a role for students who live close enough to school to be able to walk or bike to school. So you see the urban form had impact, but is contingent upon first on the distance from home to school. And well, there's other factors play into there, either as a moderator or either as a mediator, but that's sort of things right now as being well documented in literature. What we are interested in this study, at least at the first stage, is why there's a long distance from home to school. Before I get into that part, because that's sort of our main focus at this point, and it's also what I'm going to present based on the data I obtained from the Fujit School District, I want to talk about the longer home school distance, what's the sort of wider implication. So of course, from the environment perspective, longer home school distance means greater demand for travel. And that translates into pollution and translates into the demand for road space. So, you know, in some communities right now, in the morning traffic congestion or the rush hour time, amount to a third of the traffic is actually attributed to the school trips. And also the school trips, these characteristics of the school travel, because of generally of shorter distance, usually below 2 or 3 miles, those kind of travel require has a less efficient of gas use and actually have a worse emission in terms of CO2 and other pollutions. So the longer home school distance translates directly to this higher travel demand. And also, even for students who travel by bus, school bus, that travel longer time in school bus has been shown that correlated with lower academic achievement. And of course, this lack of rely on too much on the automobiles translate into a reduced level of physical activity, and many people have demonstrated that related to the increased rate of children's obesity. And from the community and society perspective, that school and home disconnection from one side that reduced this sort of social and organizational function at school, particularly elementary schools, that the traditional play in community sort of as a cohesive point that organize and get community together, that kind of function is minimized because of this disconnection. And also for society, congestion contribute to loss of productivity. And from the fairness perspective, the student who have to travel by bus, or students have to go travel through their parents driving them, those are sort of a distribution of who's burdening, who's sort of having this burden, because that directly translates to the cost of sort of related to the travel. So there are all sorts of implications, not just for environment, there's other sort of wider range implication. So that's why understanding school travel, understanding how the children get to school, the first is we need to understand why home school distance is getting longer and longer. let me see if I skipped. Okay, I think that's, so let's get to the sort of a picture. Let's look at generally the homeschool spatial pattern, distance pattern. So looking at the national picture, according to American Housing Survey, about half of the students live, we're talking about elementary school here, because those are the group of students most sensitive to the distance, because they're being young and being physically not be able to drive, walk or bike for long distance. So nationally, about 56, close to 57% of children live within a 1 mile distance to their schools. Because traditionally, neighborhood schools serving is sort of the institution to serve the neighborhood residents. So they tend to live closer, the students tend to live closer to their neighborhood schools. But still, we have about 40% of children that live beyond that distance, the 1 mile distance. And if you look at the region, there's wide variations. Orange County in California, that's Anaheim Center, area, less than 30% of students live beyond that 1 mile distance. But if you look at Charlotte, which is known for its sprawling development pattern, 63% of the children live beyond that one distance. So think of that for young children in elementary schools. Most of the children living that long distance from their school, they have to be either ride bus or either be driven to schools by their parents. And Portland, you can say, is right around national average. And what we're going to look at is city of Eugene. This is our study area. Why choose city of Eugene as our study area? I think this is more limited by the kind of match funding that we can get from the schools district. So ideally, we would sort of choose a larger school district that maybe more representative of the national average. But in our case, I think being able to get support from the 4GS school district and receive this sort of active involvement, collaboration with them, I think it's give us a strong incentive and motivation to use the 4GS school district as our study area. So we have used GIS data and then mapped out all the students that in this 4GS school district. Keep in mind, we focus on the elementary school students. And then we measured the network distance, which is basically where the students live and travel along existing streets, go to the school they are now currently attend, and then we measure that distance. So on average, a student lives about 1.5 miles from his or her school. And then if you look at sort of distribution of the household, sort of student live within certain distance to their schools, more than half of the students live beyond 1 mile. Which is actually worse than the national average. So why do students live so far from the school? There are there are a lot of factors play into here. What we're going to talk about here is mainly the three things that we have data and help us to look into of the three main reasons. So one is school size and catchment zones. And think about it, when the school gets bigger, when the catchment zone is bigger, well, you will get students live farther from their schools. And you generally see that trend because over the past 50 years, there's a sort of trend in nationwide, there's a trend to build bigger schools, larger schools. And in Oregon particularly, from 1940 to 1990, the average enrollment size from elementary school in Oregon actually increased over 4 times. So you can see that trend of getting bigger schools. And another thing is related to school size and the catchment zone is the proximity to school is not always the most important reason for assigning student to a particular school. And that actually play into why students don't get to live sort of the closest distance to the school available in their surrounding areas. Another reason, school choice. Well, there are a lot of sort of benefits and then advantages of having school choice option. And there's also sort of evidence showing that school choice has been beneficial to student population. But from the transportation perspective, the school choice allows this disconnection between where students live and which school they can go to. So that's maybe another reason that play into this longer distance. And we'll see from the evidence I'm going to show you that how much that actually play into this problem. And then the third issue is the school siting and housing opportunities. So in many communities where you do have neighborhood schools that are well connected to the community, well connected to the neighborhood, but having housing stock or the housing stock with characteristics either not affordable to young families with children or either not meet the young families' needs. In those areas, you do see that even neighborhood schools, small-sized neighborhood schools, are seeing losing enrollment, and also you see people choose to leave farther from neighborhood school to go to those neighborhood schools. So that's actually the third question. Is at this point we don't have strong evidence to show that, and that's what our surveys that we're going to send out trying to help answer this question. So it's basically look at the location of schools within the overall urban spatial structure, whether that entire spatial structure provide this sort of enabling environment to help young families to live close to school and also be able to let their children walk or bike to school. So let's look at, well, my main evidence will show the first two factors related to the homeschool distance. I hope you can see it. Okay, so just give you some background about the school district and in the 4G in Eugene. We look at 18 neighborhood schools. Those are elementary schools. Those are neighborhood schools, their attendance is based on catchment zone delineation. And because of the school choice, neighborhood schools also receive transfer students who live outside the neighborhood zone catchment areas. So we have about 4,668 students right now, and 17% of them are using a school choice program. And you look at the size of the schools, generally this is sort of a downtown area, you have smaller, older schools, and toward north there's newer schools, but bigger size. And we also have sort of smaller schools within the urban fringe. So first question, is the school size and then really play into the homeschool distance variation? Even though we only have 18 schools, we don't really can do sort of strong statistic analysis. But here, I'm just showing you, I rank the school enrollment size from the smallest to the largest. And then the percentage of students live within different distance category is listed here. So the two schools, say Edison, which is in the downtown area, older schools, has the highest percentage of students living very close. This is less than a quarter mile. And the smallest percentage of children living beyond a mile. But if you look at the other school, similar enrollment size, but quite large catchment zone area. You see that completely opposite trend distribution of homeschool distance pattern. So it seems like there are something related to how big the catchment zone areas that delineated for each school that play into the homeschool distance. But still, then you look at some school which has very large enrollment size, but you still see that still like a relatively small proportion of students that actually really live beyond 1 mile. Just sort of using eyeball to look at those numbers and compare to the percentage of students living in different distance categories. I mean, at least from my analysis, my observation, I don't see there's a strong correlation between the size of school enrollment schools and then the distance, home distance differences. Of course, like I said, this is right at this point is still a little bit preliminary data we only have based on the student address and the school they go to. And the next issue, like I mentioned, is the school catchment zone area delineation. So closest schools is not always assigned to the student to attend. So the graphic representation. For student B, Adam Elementary School is his closest elementary school. Travel from his home to the school is about 1.03 mile. But this student, his assigned school is actually Crest Drive Elementary. And then going from his home to the elementary school, that's 1.19 mile. This is about increase about 0.16 miles. For individual student, this doesn't seem to be that much big deal. But if you look at the aggregate level, that can actually add to a lot of distance. So this map shows you how the closest school versus school catchment zone area actually really differ. So color points, this is designate, sort of indicate where students live. And the color with the same, other points with the same color, indicating all the students have the same closest school. If you look at a school up there, if you say all the orange dots, all the orange student points with the same color, their closest school, they're all to the Spring Creek Elementary School. But you see the black line that sort of cut across in the middle, half of the orange dot line actually goes to another school, which is not the closest elementary schools. So you see that this is sort of this kind of a situation. It happened across the entire school district. Like some of the dots, presumably if they go to the closest school, they should go to this elementary school. But because they were assigned into this catchment zone, they go down to a school down all the way over here. So this kind of school catchment delineation adds to the school distance. At least it does not sort of minimize the school distance, home school distance. So let's look at numbers. About over the 4,668 students, elementary school students, about 900 students go to school that is not closer to them. So the average home school distance for a student attending their own neighborhood schools, this is excluding the student who go to their school of choice, which is generally out of their own neighborhood school catchment area. This at 1.21 miles. But if the students attend their closest neighborhood schools, then the average travel distance dropped to 1.06. And then when aggregate all these things together, this would be a reduction of 612 miles in travel distance from student home to schools. And we're looking at this only the one-way travel distance. And then how much school choice had added to this problem. Again, we use this student as an example. So we look at their closest distance is there, and then their the distance to their assigned school is about 1.19. Actually, this student goes to a school of choice, which is outside the school boundary. And then it is actually 2.88 miles for the student to go to a school that is completely outside his own neighborhood school boundary. So how much the school choice actually add to this problem? Edison, again, I'm using Edison as an example. This is where, in a downtown area. This is a well-sought neighborhood school in the Forges school district. For all the students, generally student living in his own catchment area that goes to school, you see that sort of the distance. But in reality, when Edison takes all the school choice per students, you see all the students that are coming to Edison travels long distance to go to these schools. So currently, 886 students use the school choice program in Forges district. So if you say compare the distance, home school distance for students who use school choice, the average distance is 2.79 miles. But not using school distance, the average travel is almost half, less than half of that distance. And look at the percentage of home school distance greater than 1 mile. 90% of the students who use school choice program live beyond 1 mile, versus only 47% of students that not using school choice program living beyond that distance. So if we just sort of using hypothetical scenario, say if all the students who attend the school of their choice, but instead now they attend their neighborhood schools, their average school home distance will be reduced to 1.29 compared to now is 2.79. And there will be a reduction of 1,242 miles just for one way. And bear in mind, for all the students who use the school choice program, there's no school bus option for them. And then for most of them, they will be driven by their parents to their school of choice. And that's 1,242 miles. That's actually across the continent of the America. So you think that distance is it's a quite substantial distance that has to be carried out through automobile travel. So if our goal is to reduce travel need for the student using the method of reduce home school distance, we could look at this sort of compare these two scenarios. So currently, with all the students that going to their school, going to their neighborhood schools or going to their school of choice, now what we say is 1.5 miles on average, the home school distance. And in total, the home school distance is about 6,900 miles. But if we get rid of the school choice program and we ask students to all attend their own neighborhood schools, we see a 19% reduction in their total travel distance. And then if we can redraw the boundary of school catchment zone areas, then let the student to be able to go to their closest schools, there's additional 13% of reduction in the total travel distance. I'm only looking sort of from home to school. And in total, we get about a third of the reduction from the home school distance. And if you look at if you think about the home school distance has to be traveled either by car or by bus, that's a substantial reduction in the amount or in the demand of the car mileage needs to be used, or even bus mileage needs to be used there. So to the third reason I just mentioned, the home school distance also is affected by the school location within the overall urban spatial structure, particularly the housing stock characteristics surrounding the schools. So this is the issue that we're going to tackle and do an in-depth study in our survey. And I just want to point out why those factors is playing a role in affecting home school distance. So just look here. Remember, Twin Oaks is the school that has the largest percentage of students that are living beyond 1 mile. So look at the housing distribution around this school. It's very low density. And then I don't have the street sort of network displayed here, but it's very, very poorly disconnected in terms between the school and the surrounding housing stock. So that's why how the housing stock sort of distributed around the school site play a role. And then you look at these two other schools, Edison and Adam. They're both downtown neighborhood schools. They're old with comparative size. But you still see the variation, like Adam has more than 27% of students living beyond 1 mile. But Edison only have 9.4%. What's the reason for you see this dramatic difference? What we are suspecting and we hypothesis is because the land use characteristics and the housing stock characteristics surrounding these two elementary schools or within these two elementary schools at catchment area are quite different. And that's something we're going to look at in our survey, through our the in-depth study of the land use characteristics and housing stock characteristics. So I don't have sort of a survey data to report, but I can sort of give you some idea of how we're going to do this research. So So the conceptual framework that we use, that we take, sort of incorporate this housing choice, sort of residential location choice into the school travel study, is we think the location and context, contextual characteristics of a school, which including the school site itself, including the urban form characteristics for the surrounding the school, that relate a lot to the walkability issues, and also the land use and housing characteristics around the school, plays a great role to determine these two things, home-school proximity and walkability. And these two things get together, determine the kind of school travel mode that parents choose for their kids. Because we're looking at elementary schools, the parents are the primary decision maker for those students. And the household characteristic also played into a role here, moderate the land use, the spatial context impact on the home school proximity. So this is more like an ecological model we look at. And if you look at think about the decision-making process that parents is taking, then this is a more sort of complicated behavior model that we propose to sort of combining housing location and school travel together. So what we're looking at is parents with certain knowledge, with certain social and cultural norm, which is determined by their education, their income, their experience, their race, their employment status. These things help parents to develop a certain attitude toward different travel means. And then this attitude, together with parents' perceived environment control. The environment control is basically what the parents to perceive, they examine the total environment to say whether the environment is an enabling factor or whether it's a constraining factor that help them to make housing location that could be close to the school, or maybe constraining them from making that decision so that they couldn't use the preferred walking or biking to school choice. So these things play together to give parents intention of choosing certain travel means. And that intention plays into their location choice. And also their intention plays directly into their children's travel choice. And together with all the urban form characteristics and safety and the other social factors here, determine the likelihood of a child that are going to be using different types of transportation means. So this is sort of a more complicated behavior model we're going to use to consider. We have based this on the planned behavior theory that is developed in a field of psychology. So the research question that we're going to tackle in our survey is there are three main questions. So how is school travel implicitly or explicitly considered in families' decision-making process for residential location? So residential location is a well-studied topic in housing studies. We all know this decision process involves this kind of trade-offs that parents need to consider: accessibility to employment, accessibility to service, and then accessibility to school. Means proximity to school is one of the one of the 5 most frequently cited reasons for parents to determine where they want to live. But most of the study until now haven't put that proximity to school in the context of school travel consideration. So I think that's sort of the contribution by answer this question, we're going to make to the literature. And what and how do local environment factors play a role in housing location choice and in turn determine home-school proximity? And the third one, how do home-school distance, urban form characteristics, and parents' travel preference, which then we look at parents' attitude, their intentions, all together affect trips to schools. So how we're going to do it? We will survey about 4,500 households live within the city of Eugene 4G school district. We will distribute our survey, which we expect is the survey is going out in about a week. And we will use GIS-based measures to link the environment characteristics to the survey database we eventually will get. So altogether, we will have a big database that give us measurement about parents' attitude, local environment characteristics around school sites, within neighborhood school catchment zone areas, and parents, children's real school travel behavior. And all these things we will hope to sort of tackle all the research questions I just mentioned. And this is all I'm presenting for today. Thank you. And any questions?
So we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah.
It's not working,
No,
so there you
okay.
go.
Charles Hang, Urban Studies faculty. So it was fascinating, and I'm really be interested to see what the survey produces for you, and I know that you'll learn a lot from that. But I have some experience with my daughters, making this sort of school choice thing and neighborhood choice and so forth, and housing choices around that. And one thing that is apparent, a couple things apparent in the Portland area, for one, is that the magnet school has a real, as you said, the school choice thing has a real impact. I'm guessing it would be a bit larger than your 17% that down in Eugene, but I'm not really sure, but I think it's probably larger here. And then I was thinking about this, and I'm thinking about that choice they made, whether they chose a different kind of neighborhood and the housing choices and all these other behavioral kind of decisions they had to make. And then I began to think about what would a school board member do if they really thought that one of the very important things they wanted to do was make it more possible for more kids to walk to school, for the reasons that you suggest. And it's just really hard for me to think about how they would go about making choices, because they have so many issues at hand. One is the population changes around schools, the quality of the school building itself, the changing boundaries of schools. And then from the other side, I'm thinking of the parents, and one of the things that the parents never know, and it's been really problematic here, is whether that school's going to stay open. And so they begin to make plans on one thing, and then the school closes. And so I'm just thinking, even after you do all of this work, what specifically do you think you could either tell a parent or tell a school board member to make to improve this distance to school question?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that there's a sort of things can become quite political and controversial, because as like here, when doing research, we can prioritize one goal, like in transportation. We prioritize transportation and then link that to the home school distance. But for the school board perspective, they have so many things they have to consider, and transportation may not be even on their agenda. And I know in Eugene School, 4GS district, they also foresee the closure of quite a few schools because of the economic sort of unsustainability in terms of their operation. But I think what I hope to get from this research is to find a way that whether the school planning, just sort of hope to make the school board member realize that school planning and land use planning should go hand in hand, and that when you decide the school site location, you should be able to at least understand what the existing housing characteristics is, and also with the help from land use planners, with the help with the guidance from the comprehensive plan, be able to foresee what the future urban development is, and using that at least as a way to help prevent completely ignoring the sort of homeschool distance travel as an issue here. I don't know if that helped answer the question, but I think that's my hope there.
Would one policy recommendation for the school board be to identify school districts that are not going to be subject to close and that are not going to be subject to school choice, and guarantee parents a certain term of certainty so that they could organize themselves to really support a particular school, so they wouldn't have to use school choice to get a better school.
Yes.
And perhaps that kind of certainty would help parents in making their decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
More questions? If there's a microphone there, you can use that one. Does it work? So hold that.
Oh, I can actually just talk about it. My name is Laura Wintergreen. I'm with the City of Portland's Safer Routes to Schools program. We deal with a lot of this issue. I know that the city and the school district have formed a group called and sort of initiative with family housing and schools focus, and looking at where housing is in relation to schools. Being in an urban area where we've already had schools established, it isn't like working in a suburban area where you might be looking at future school placement, and you're unfortunately many suburban areas looking at the super schools where they place them out in the middle of nowhere because they have more property. And on the federal level, the direction saying you need so much space per student, and that's being reconsidered federally so that you can be looking at, you know, not needing that spatial, so you can have those schools placed more related to where housing is as opposed to looking to where there's land. But in Portland, the issue, and you were talking about the school closures and the school consolidations and sort of following the population and following where is the housing, and you're looking at affordability issues of where can families afford to live. And then you couple that with the No Child Left Behind Act that allows school choice because of low achievement. To me, it seems the number one thing that school districts can do is really focus on achievement that crosses all class, race, boundary lines, so that all neighborhood schools become equally effective schools, and then you can reestablish that you go to neighborhood schools, and then you have, you know, a principal in one of the principals in our program saying that's the number one thing that has to happen, is that there's not school choice based on the issue that schools are underachieving. And then you can establish the boundaries and saying within this circumference you go to this school.
Yeah.
And then that allows you to then support more modal choices that are efficacious time-wise for parents, which is such a big issue, you know, and being able to, as we're doing with our schools to some degree, working with parents, we're doing assessment this year where we're assessing what are the travel choices when you live a half-mile distance, a mile to 2 miles and more. What are the modal choices, and then how do we reinforce choices that reinforce walking and biking to school or using carpooling, and what is effective in doing that. And so we're doing some program assessment around those issues. But the number one issue for parents is distance in what we've done previously. And many people think a big issue is about safety, criminality, social safety. In actuality, that comes in after weather in Portland. That's like sixth on the surveys we've done with parents. It's the sixth most important thing. Weather's more concerned to them, and that's not something we can change except to help them see that there are clothing choices that can address that issue.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons actually motivated me to do this research is after reading an article on New York Times that talks about Portland from 1990 to 2000, the downtown population, the population for children for school age increased by 1%, despite the huge population growth in Portland you see in this area. And then that result to close of a lot of schools. And that's the similar things happen in Seattle and San Francisco. So what actually motivated me is how is the housing affordability really play into people's location choice, and that actually then translates into the school enrollment size. So that's why I think one of the issues we want to look at is trying to map out the housing stock distribution within different neighborhood catchment zone area to see to what degree the affordability actually drives out young families. And I know this is a serious issue in Portland, but in Eugene, that issue, that problem may not be so serious. So we'll wait to see what the data tells us. Another thing related to this school choice, well, definitely sort of the variation in school quality play a great role in parents' decision making of whether they're going to use school choice. But another issue here is this land use distribution. Like the example I showed you in Edison. Edison is a school with great sort of academic quality, but this is not the best school in terms of the reporting sort of scores. Why so many people choose Edison as their school of choice is because Edison is so close to U of O. There's a big employer. A lot of parents choose to use this school because they can drive to their workout place on their way and then drop their kids in the school. So there's a connection between school and then land use distributions. So that's something I don't think is being considered in school choice. I mean, the literature I've read so far. So I think that would be very interesting to see how many people really do that using sort of combining these trips and then take advantage of school choice at the same time. Yeah, so that's the issue there. So definitely there are a lot of questions that we want to at least get some insights or get some clues about why this is happening and whether there's some way we can address it. Yeah.
The mic is for the webcast.
Oh, sorry.
You cited that there has been lower academics correlated with distance to school. Was that restricted to urban versus suburban, urban versus rural areas? Because I grew up in a rural area, and just by the geography, I had a 45-minute bus ride to high school long before they were protesting busing in Boston. But just wondered if that was across all areas or if that was mostly in urban areas?
Yeah, that's actually, I think it's more relevant to the rural area. So that study, I can give you a citation. It's done by 1996. And then I think their study sample is actually rural area. And that study was later cited by Emily Taylor when she wrote about the unequal distribution on people's burden, sort of the students' time sacrifice trying to go into the school go to school by school bus as a result of the closure of a lot of schools in the rural Virginia. So I can give you a citation that you can take a look. Yeah.
Actually, I'm not really familiar. Oh, sorry. I'm not really familiar with Eugene. Have you found any trends between like rich neighborhoods versus poor neighborhoods and mode choice that way?
I haven't looked at because we don't have data to make that generalization.
I didn't know
but I do have an anecdotal story that university professors who determined that they want their children to be able to walk to the school, particularly walk to Edison School. There's this one professor who told me he spent what his realtor told him, you have spent more than $100,000 more to purchase a house to be able to locate close. I mean, this house is close to the school and within this neighborhood. I mean, similar house, in a more French suburban area, you could spend $100,000 less. And that professor says, I think it's worth it. I want my children to be able to walk to this school I like. So I think there's definitely people who, with resource and with the determination that they prefer a certain type of transportation means for their children, they can achieve their goals because they have resource. And also that indicates the other aspect is the environment is not so enabling for everybody to do that. For people without resources, they don't have if they want high quality of housing, then they have to sacrifice the distance. They have to sacrifice that the children not being able to walk to school because they want the high quality housing affordable to them is only at urban fringe, not within the close distance to schools. So that's sort of based on an anecdotal story. What are we trying to find out is whether that data we collected will help us to get some insights in this issue. Yeah. Yep.
We've got quite a few web questions that you've sort of already answered, but a new one just came in about, do you know of any school districts where the school buses to all schools of choice, including magnet schools?
That I don't know. I know in Eugene, school of choice has no transportation option from sort of availability from the school, and the student to go to the magnetic school don't have any transportation provided from the school.
As far as I know, the Beaverton School District, if you're going to an option school, they will provide transportation. However, I would put in the caveat as a parent who has chosen not to use it in theory. When my son was put in a middle school program that was on different hours than his middle school, his bus transportation to school would be basically he'd be taking two sides of the equilateral triangle of the straight line to school that his normal bus would have taken. And because of my history, like I said, that 45-minute bus ride when I was in high school, I wasn't willing to put my kid through a 50-hour transit, and it happened to help my husband get going in the morning that he had to take the kid to school. But it also, in the afternoon, he was willing to do it, that they'd take him to his local high school and send him home. The other thing that happened, and this is just anecdotal again, but within the first 2 months, we did have him riding the bus to kind of establish that, yes, this is an option so that you can always use the buses. They had twice that at the transfer point, the bus heading to his middle school left before all the feeder buses got there, which didn't seem to me like rocket science to have figured out. You know, you wait till all your feeder buses are here. And I was actually going to a PTO meeting at his school, and they told me in the office, oh, he's late today because the bus left. What they didn't tell me was he still wasn't at the school that day. They didn't get him there till after 10:30 that morning. So there can be hitches, but in theory, Beaverton does provide that.
Any more questions?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I think it's really important work. You mentioned that as part of the study you would be looking at some environmental factors in the walking and bicycling environment around the school, GIS-based measures. I wonder if you could elaborate on which measures you were thinking about including those factors.
Right now we have all the student address geocoded on the map. So we will do, and also all the schools mapped out on map. So we'll look at sort of the quarter mile, that rule of thumb, walkable distance environment audit, and look at the kind of street presence, sort of presence of sidewalks, and then number of intersections, and the type of streets. And then at this point, we haven't decided if we want to send students to do a site visit to really give us a sort of a evaluation, assessment of the school site walkability. So this is on the school side. So for each of the student home, we will also look at the kind of environment, so in terms of streets, connectivity. For the students, it's hard to do the presence of sidewalks with so many addresses to look at. So we will be mainly look at street connectivity, type of streets, type of intersections, and the kind of land uses. Just trying to look at whether certain type of land use that generates a lot of traffic that sort of imposing danger, a barrier to the walkability quality in that walkable quality in that area. So that's the main GIS part. And we will also be using the parcel files to estimate the kind of land uses that within the neighborhood sites that we think is actually a traffic generator, either as an employer or either as a sort of commercial site. We don't know what's the effect of those kind of land uses on travel, and particularly on the home sort of location choice. But we do know in theory they have impact. But it's an empirical question, what kind of direction those impacts is going.
Yeah, just going back to your data, and the question you first addressed was, what difference would it make if kids went to the nearest school, the one that was closest to them? And the way I understood it, you were going to map the distance on a travel route, not just as the crow flies, sort of thing.
Yes.
And so that makes a lot of sense. But it would seem to me that the school districts may already have done intuitively the best I don't know if this is true, they may have intuitively made the best choices possible for the maximum number of people because of all of the things you actually just mentioned. There may be barriers like freeways, there may be barriers like rivers or other kinds of maybe some excessive traffic created by employment, and they have made decisions that may in fact be it may be the best distance. So, I'm just kind of curious as how you're going to deal with that, because you're kind of making an assumption that it's best to go the shortest distance through a kind of route that you're guessing is a good route. But there may be kind of other things intervening.
Right. I do know when school board make decision delineate catchment area, there are a number of issues they want to consider. So they want to avoid segregation, so they don't want sort of a poor neighborhood a student all went to one or go to one school. So that delineation help trying to avoid that situation from happening. And also the delineation is also considered how easy they can run the bus routes. So those are the things they need to sort of balance with the closest for proximity issue. And also you need to remember, most of the school boundary delineated was basically done by hand before that GIS is available. So at this point, we have GIS that help us to identify the shortest route and to give us precise measure of the distance between school and home. And I think like 40 years ago, when the school board made the decision on catchment area, this is my guess, I don't think they actually done very accurate job to looking at the distance, because they don't have that equipment and tool to help them to make that decision. And I think if what are we going to present to this, we'll eventually present our finding to the school board, is to say whether they will find the utility of using this more advanced spatial analysis tool, help them maybe to make a better decision, make a better choice about how the boundary should be delineated. So that's my guess.
Thank you very much for wrapping up, I think, a very nice quarter and a great talk today. And want to thank everyone for coming, and we'll see you back in a few weeks, first week in April. We'll be back for spring quarter. Thanks. Pretty interesting, everything that you've been able to do with the home locations.
Right.
Yeah.
The data set we will